Were there things that transpired on 9/11 15 years ago this week that tell you that there were some people around in the money business that knew this thing was going to happen?
Yeah, sure.
Really?
Yeah.
Like what?
Well, I don't know where you want to start.
Really? Was it that many? Really?
Yeah.
That tell you that the jig is up, so to speak. That this thing, there's something rotten in Denmark.
Well, there was definitely something rotten in Denmark.
Sure.
You had
of
hundreds
course.
of billions of dollars worth of government securities that were electronically cleared. And the entire marketplace that would have normally looked at these securities and went, hey, where'd these come from? They went down in the rubble. Cantor Fitzgerald, Euro Brokers, and Garbon Intercapital were the three major bond brokers in the world.
So what does that mean to us? Tell us like we're a golden retriever.
Okay.
Because that doesn't mean anything to us, bond brokers.
No.
What is that? Yeah.
Okay, so the guys that buy and sell the Treasury's debt every day
Yeah.
were concentrated right where the plane hit, curiously. 41% of the fatalities in the trade tower were Cantor Fitzgerald employees and Eurobroker employees.
That many people of Cantor
Almost half of everyone that died were from that.
And so they're brokers and they buy Treasury debt.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, so
what's wrong with
let's
that?
put it this way. Nearly half of the people that died during the 9/11 event were bond brokers.
Okay.
Treasury bond. And for the first time in history, the Securities and Exchange Commission invoked a national emergency. They said, "Hey, this is a national emergency," and so
what is a national emergency?
The 9/11 attack was a national emergency, and that under the Securities and Exchange Act, they were allowed to essentially eliminate all of the regulatory restrictions for clearing and settling securities that would have in other words, had the tower not been hit. And this is it's the curious September issuance date in 1991 of the original bonds, and then the maturity date. You're talking $240 billion in bonds that were essentially coming due starting that day. And
starting what day?
September 11th, 2001.
That the Treasury have to pay?
Yeah.
Who's paying?
It was a maturity date.
So who benefited then?
Well, who benefited were the holders of these securities.
Yeah.
These were nobody knew about them securities. Again, a quarter of $1 trillion.
That weren't on the books?
That weren't essentially on the books. That, weren't supposed to exist. And they had existed because back in 1991, this idea of crushing the Soviet Union was big on the minds of I'll give you a few terms if you want to check them out and a few names, Dick Cheney, Don Rumsfeld, Paul Wolfowitz, you remember them.
The usual suspects.
So they called themselves the Vulcans, if you want to look them up, the Vulcans.
The Vulcans?
Vulcans.
Okay.
And they were going to finish off what Ron Reagan, forgive me.
What do you mean, the Russians?
The Russians.
The Ruskies?
Yeah, they were going to put the Soviet Union under the ground.
Really?
Yeah, that was
you're not talking nuclear. Okay?
No, they were just going to crush them. And
financially,
the way that they did it was Project Hammer. Here's some terms if you want to look them up.
I don't know how you know all this.
Search name, sorry. Black Eagle Trust. We talked about Yamashita's gold and the Golden Lily Treasure.
Right.
Project Hammer. So what they had done was issued $240 billion worth of Treasury bonds in 1991 and covert, hidden money, and then used these bonds to buy all of the critical Soviet industry. So, they fanned, much the way that they do with their currency raiders, they fanned into the Soviet Union and sort of took over everything that mattered.
Bought stuff,
all the stuff.
With created money.
Yeah. So, but curiously enough, the bonds come due right at a time when those towers are hit. And so the Securities and Exchange Commission, for the first time in history, said, well, it doesn't matter where these things, right? We had regulations. You're presenting me a treasury bond to cash. Who are you? Where's the money going? Where did it come from? And all of these things that
Sure.
we would normally do,
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden we don't have to do anymore. And so for the next 2 weeks after 9/11,
Yeah.
the securities market was allowed to clear these bonds without asking who they belonged to, where they came from, where they were issued, nothing. They just say, oh, that's a bond. Here you go. Here's your money. And 240, 250, almost $250 billion was cleared in that 2 week period. And nobody knows where it came from, where it went, or how they got into the system.
So nobody knows the beneficiaries of this little thing because they just don't know who benefited.
Oh, well, there was an investigation going on.
Well,
You know, the investigation by the Office of Naval Intelligence, ONI,
yeah.
and you know where they were headquartered?
Maryland?
In that section of the Pentagon that was hit by the second airliner.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So it kind of destroyed their entire record apparatus and, everything that they had done. So now, and it wasn't just that. In fact, there were 30 employees at the Office of Naval Intelligence that were working on this particular case. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
29 of them died.
Really?
29. Now, they had just moved this Naval Command Center into a newly opened section of the Pentagon like a month before that. And all of the certificates for all the bonds that were traded were kept in vaults beneath the World Trade Center along with the gold. So all of that combined, just wow, what a coincidence. I have just never seen.
It is a coincidence.
It's just such a coincidence. And then, of course, I heard the story, which I relayed on the air. And I have to check my notes on a lot of this, but as I recall, it was firsthand information and with photos of it was a semi loaded with gold and a lead car and a chase car. And they were found in the tunnel beneath the towers, and I believe it was from the vaults of the Bank of Nova Scotia. Again, I'd have to check my notes. It is, 15 years ago. But they apparently didn't have time to get this one truck full of gold out. And so as they cleared the rubble and went into that tunnel, they found this semi-convoy. And, of course, the questions arose. How did you organize a truck that quick? Where'd you get the lead car and the follow car? And how'd you load all that gold in there between the time the plane hit the towers and the thing collapsed? It was
well, that's impossible. So they were going to go in that morning anyway. They just went in too late, or whatever. They got caught. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
And
I just know that there's no way that they could have organized the convoy at 8:48, had the truck in the basement, and then
I don't think
nearly filled.
Well, maybe you could.
Maybe you could, but an hour and a half in downtown Manhattan
after it's
on
been
a
hit?
Monday morning.
Oh, after it was hit? No,
Well,
you couldn't get
that
near the
would
place.
have been. Well, then tell me, Patrick.
Come on.
What reason would you have to call a semi and a lead car and a follow car before it was hit?
Well, you'd have to know.
You'd have to know. Boom! Oh, this tower's been hit. Holy cow! We got to get the gold out of the basement. Call the trucking guy. He says he can come next Tuesday. But Andrew, are you gonna get stuff? Look, I need you here in 5 minutes.
Yeah, but let's think about it. So, say you and you and I would be the perpetrators of this dastardly deed, and we wanted to get the gold out.
Yeah.
Heck, we would have gotten it out a week ago. Why would you wait till the last minute?
A lot of it was gotten out, except that last.
Oh,
semi.
I see.
Yeah.
So
one of their convoy was kind of stuck.
So you have no idea who owned this gold.
Well, I don't think anyone has any idea who owned this gold. A lot of it was recovered in the vault afterwards and was sold as recovery gold. 10th ounce eagles and Krugerrands. I've seen American silver eagles. I've seen just about every variety of bullion coin in an NGC certified or PCGS certified Trade Center WTC recovery. So that means after the rubble was cleared out. And this, of course, I do remember this episode because we had all of our local firemen and cops in the city digging through the rubble in a recovery effort to try to recover the bodies. And when they pulled the gold out of the vaults, they made all of those guys stop and leave. They're
Really?
like, get off your,
Get out
yeah,
of here,
stop
man.
looking.
Don't be
Bodies are
looking
not
no
important.
stinking gold.
You go stand over there while we retrieve our gold. And they did. They literally cleared the site. And a lot of these guys, man, they were angry. You know, it's like, how dare you? I'm trying to find the remains of my brother who died in this tragedy, and you're over there worried about your little pile of gold and whether or not I'm going to try to steal some of it. Because that's, I mean, what other reason would you have to clear the site?
Okay, so those are two things. What about, there was a huge amount, of course, this could have gone from anywhere, of shorts on American Airlines or the.
Oh, well, yeah, you had those.
That was
You had,
huge, right?
Oh, yeah.
Somebody made a bunch of money.
And there was, and yeah, well.
That knew.
You know, but the Keene Commission, if you recall, issued the 9/11 report. So there were two other avenues that deal with the money, and one has to do with all of these precognition incidents where people were, you know, shorting the airlines and things of that nature.
Right.
And then you had the trail of money back and forth between the hijackers and their source of origin. And they found that
You mean these 9 dudes?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, 14, whatever it was.
They were.
They had a source of funds. You know, these guys weren't working. They were going to airline school. They were infiltrating communities and learning about things. So we had them right here in Paterson, New Jersey, which is literally next door to where we are. And they had to get their money from somewhere. And the total amount of money that was spent it wasn't a lot. It was only $300,000. So
Well, you had to go to strip clubs at night and stuff like that.
Very good. Yeah, whatever you had to do.
Well, that's what terrorists do in the middle of the night, right?
So there were 27 pages, 28 pages of the report that were redacted and withheld from the public until last month.
Oh.
And it effectively implicated Saudi and Pakistani intelligence services.
Yes.
And the Pakistani intelligence services, and again, I'll have to look at my notes, more than any, the head of the ISI, which is the Pakistani intelligence service, was implicated in the transfer of $300,000 to these hijackers. And one of the 9/11 truth guys cornered Tom Keene in the hallways in Washington and said, "Why didn't you investigate that further? Like, you know, finance these guys.
Follow the string there."
And he said, "Well, since it was only $300,000, they could have gotten the money anywhere, so it's not important where they really got it."
Really?
Yeah. So the cover up again in terms of where the money came from that these guys used.
Yeah.
You know, all arrows pointed back to the Saudis, who, incidentally, the entire Saudi royal family that was enjoying their stay in the United States was rounded up and put on a plane, and it was the only plane flying on 9/12.
That's true. Now that was a true thing.
Well, all of it's true.
Well, wasn't supposed. So the rumor. Yeah, excuse me. So the rumor that was it Osama Ben Houthi family was also on there.
Bin Laden family
on the 12th.
That's correct.
Huh.
It was only plane flying.
Only plane flying.
Yeah.
That's pretty weird.
Yeah.
That's weird. Is that the only money stuff that you know of?
Well,
so we got the stocks,
those
we
are
got
the four
the
big
bonds
ones,
and the gold.
You got the guys that were shorting with precognition.
Yeah.
So they obviously must have known something about it.
They were Karnaks.
If the idea is that these 19 angry, knife-wielding Islamic terrorists got on a plane and caused all this havoc without deeper roots and deeper permissions, that is absurd. Yeah. I mean, the very notion of it is absurd.
In that regard, I think it's very interesting. Does anyone know the status of this bill that was passed by the House a couple days ago, last week, saying you could sue, the people want to sue Saudi Arabia for 9/11.
President Bush, good God.
Good God.
President Obama
is sitting on, right?
Is going to veto it. He's assured everyone that he's going. Yeah.
Well, the House passed it, last May? The Senate passed it last May. Then
yeah,
the House
and then the House just passed it. Yeah.
So he's going to veto this?
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody's talking about this one.
Yeah.
Are they? Are the mainstream talking about this?
Well, I heard a little blurb about it, but you know, in the interest of international relations, he's not going to allow the families of these victims to sue the perpetrators. I mean, especially now that it's so clear who it was.
Wow. So do they have enough votes to overturn the veto?
They may. This may be one of the first Obama vetoes that's overturned. We'll see. But again,
it's just some more stuff,
yeah,
right?
just another
thing.
Just
man.
another link in the chain. Yeah.
Well, I'll do one more. As long as we're digging up.
Wait, we're not done, are we? Because there is one.
Okay.
There's a key player in all this.
Okay. It's always more with you.
Buzz Krongard.
Buzz Krongard.
Yes.
You don't make these names up, do you?
No, I don't. Yes.
You don't make these names up, do you?
No, I don't.
They sound good. Buzz Krongard.
Yes.
What is Buzz up to? What was his deal?
Well, Buzz is Bankers Trust.
Yeah.
Right? Alex Brown and Sons.
Yeah.
Yes?
I don't know, but go
so
ahead.
Bankers Trust was taken over by Alex Brown.
Yeah.
And they had issued a bunch of Russian loans in the mid-'90s.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember the Enron
I do.
debacle.
Yeah.
So starting in August of 1993,
Yeah.
that the Vulcans were full speed into their takeover of Russian industry.
Chaining the boys.
Correct.
Okay.
And Bankers Trust and Alex Brown and that Buzz Krongard. Buzzy Krongard.
Buzzy.
Yes, it's funny.
Oh, Buzzy.
Yeah. So Deutsche Bank, Deutsche Bank,
we know
Alex
them.
Brown,
Yeah.
Bankers Trust.
Yeah.
Right. Like talk about ground zero.
Yeah.
They're right in the middle of all of this. Buzz Krongard, I think J. Carter Beese, and you'd have to pull the thread and see the names again, just like with the Clinton Foundation. Where do they come from? Who are they? I think this whole entire story we talked about several times over the years, but it all revolves around this Black Eagle Trust and the Golden Lily Treasure. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, there's another screenplay we need to write.
Yeah.
Andrew.
So I mean, entire.
There's never been a movie about the whole money thing on it, has there?
Well, yeah.
Has there? I
Well,
don't think so.
no, I don't think there has been a
we
good
need
one.
to do that. Yeah.
But this one about these bonds and how they were issued,
Yeah,
and for 10 years how they just sat there.
Yeah.
And the two companies that would have most likely been clearing these trades. In fact, the two biggest government bond firms in the country were wiped out during 9/11. And so was the Office of Naval Intelligence that was investigating this entire thing. And then now, Building 7 with all of the agencies
Well, don't
in
even
Building
get me
7.
started with
oh,
Building
man, the whole
7.
Enron thing and everything related to it.
Yeah, tell folks what Building 7, for those of you who aren't, out in Rio de Janeiro over the last 20 years.
That was the one that collapsed after they said it collapsed.
That's right.
Where the British anchor is on TV saying, Building 7 collapsed, and it's standing behind her. And then while she's talking, you see the thing coming down.
Did you see that? That's a true...
Yeah, no, it's...
Now, obviously, Building 7 was...
where the emergency command center...
They pulled this building. They had charges. Somebody had charges set up before 9/11, and then they just brought the building down in its own footprint. Of course, the original story today is still that it was because of fire from office furniture in Building 7, but not
pull the fireman is what
quite.
Larry
Of course,
Silverstein. When they called me and said they want to pull it, I said, "Yeah, go ahead and pull it."
So I mean,
I
he's
meant
on
the fireman.
Yeah.
That's what I meant.
So
pull the fireman.
So what kind of stuff was in Building 7 that whoever was up to this thing wanted to make sure that thing went down on 9/11?
Everything.
Really?
The IRS, the SEC, every investigation into. I think the numbers again. I'll have to check my notes.
You mean ongoing investigation?
Number of cases dismissed or closed was in the hundreds, where hundreds of cases were either closed or dismissed because everything they had was in that building and went down in a heap.
Who's they?
They, the IRS, the SEC, the Commodities and Futures Trading Commission.
Wow.
All
the dirty laundry.
Yeah, there were a lot of ongoing investigations into the Enron scandal and Global Crossings and several other huge scams. What eventually became the .com bubble, right? Was all all the investigations centered around this insider trading and the creation of false instruments and so forth, all headquartered in that Building 7. When it came down, hundreds of investigations were closed, and And they went no further based on lack of evidence now.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that it was brought down because of dynamite or thermite charges on each floor. I mean, that's what it was.
I won't even get into that.
I mean,
just,
yeah, I mean, you can see
know what?
it. I
The
mean,
coincidence is enough for me.
Oh.
Just the coincidence
Just
is
that it
enough
happened.
for me.
Yeah. But I
don't need
mean,
much
I think
further.
I think it's relevant that somebody planted this stuff on September 10th.
Well, there may be evidence of that. I mean,
they had to. You couldn't have gone in there during the day.
Whenever anything like this happens, I always jump to the first thing. It's like, okay, if someone were to do this, who would benefit? What would be the benefit? It's like not whether or not they did it. I don't, when it's that much of a coincidence, then I got to get into the details. So
I see. You go right there. Huh?
Yeah. So if you go back and study the history of the crisis and see the government agencies and how they swung into service, and this idea that the strike was symbolic. You remember that's what we were being told, that it was a symbolic strike, strike at the heart of freedom and so forth.
Sure.
A symbolic strike, you take out the Statue of Liberty. You don't take out the entire bond brokerage floor of the World Trade Center. You couldn't have aimed that plane any better if you were trying to take out, Euro Brokers and Cantor Fitzgerald, because they did indeed wipe those firms out completely.
Wiped them out.
Yeah, the two biggest bond brokers in the United States, gone in an instant. And then as the buildings collapsed, the Federal Reserve stood up and said, okay, any money that you were due here, we'll stand here as though, so if all you got to do is tell us that somebody in that building owed you money.
And we'll pay you.
Yeah, and I see that we were all over the Fed's balance sheet, as we usually are. And I found that they pumped in $300 billion in
overnight.
Yeah. And, well, they were telling everyone else that they had about $100 billion in any given day that they cleared and transferred. But, Bank of New York, there were so many, Deutsche Bank and J.P. Morgan, all of them had clearing problems because of what happened. Who
was the New York Fed president at that time?
Geithner, Timothy.
Oh, I thought he worked for Goldman Sachs.
Well, he
Before.
did.
He did. I don't. I just get confused, Government Sachs. Okay.
But the settlement fails in the. For example, you look at the problems that were circulating around the banking industry at that time. Bank of New York, right, had more fails than anybody, but yet they weren't even affected by the hit. So it was very, very strange. It was a very strange circumstance involving the banks and the clearing of government securities during that time period, during that 2-week period. If it wasn't the reason, then it was one of those never waste a good crisis circumstances, like the merchant who has a flood in his basement and starts dragging all of the unsold inventory over to the flood area. It is a curious situation how these transactions were cleared during that 2-week period. And there's a great, Federal Reserve report on it, which I, of course, have read. You can read it, too, if you like. Just looks at the problems and the connectivity problems between that day. Curiously, $266 billion, I think, in failed transactions. Nearly $300 billion in settlement fails, where you owe me the money, and what do you mean you don't have it? Involving banks that weren't even part of the incident. So, convenience, coincidence, I don't know. But it certainly seemed to dovetail nicely into everything that required fixing. All of a sudden, it was all fixed, and we went on.
Well, that's enough to want you to have another cup of coffee. All that.
Yeah.
9/11, 15 years ago.